ladies and gentlemen.
Live from the van down by the river.
Starring
Mike Murray and
Nicole.
Rovine.
This
is
SNL.
SNL
By the numbers.
Numbers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to By the Numbers SNL Season 48, Episode 3. We are here for our third consecutive week, and we're so excited. We have a guest who is in the chat with us, but I will start with my co-host and the man who makes this entire thing possible, truly, Mike Murray. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Nicole. How you feeling? How's the hair?
I'm good. The hair is good. I just got my hair cut and colored and did a whole thing with my hair, and it always takes longer than I think it will take because I have very thick hair. Even now it is half the length it was before. It was like I have one of those like mops for hair sometimes where if I forget about it for 6 months, it will be like on my butt, down to my butt, which is great. But then it takes, many hours to do anything to it. But here I am.
Yeah, this is a cue to all the listeners is that watch on video because Nicole gets her hair done for this show.
That's true. That is very true. And then
I'm feeling good. I'm psyched to introduce our guest. He's like my SNL network white whale. I've been trying to book him, and now he's here. I feel like last season when they booked Sudeikis, this is how I feel right now, that Bill Kenney is on the panel on By the Numbers. Big sports guy, big SNL guy. He's in the right place. How we doing, Bill?
What an introduction. Almost as good as the song you guys have leading into the show. As superfans need something like that. That is fantastic. I've enjoyed that all 3 weeks. I'm doing great. Other than my sports teams all stinking, at least I still have SNL and the statistics that go with that. So I'm ready to have some fun tonight.
Did you recognize some of the voices in the intro?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I'd have to parse it out just to figure out every one of them. But yeah, I definitely recognize quite a few.
Yeah, I'll send you a copy of the intro, and then you can see how many you can name before we do a reveal.
That will be
some
fun.
People have asked me, publish everyone who you put in there. And I'm like, well, it might be fun to try to figure it
out.
Full credit to Mike, by the way, for that intro. What can't Mike do? I don't know. I will, When I figure it out, I will let everyone know something he can't do. So far, I haven't figured it out. But Bill, we want to kind of take your temperature check. So on the season, Mike and I have been talking here week to week, thinking about the season, how things are going. And so we want to get your thoughts on the first 3 episodes and then this specific last episode with Megan Thee Stallion.
Well, it's kind of an up and down feel so far. I'm not quite sure what to think of the writing, which is kind of my biggest concern right now. Going into the season, we wondered who was going to fill the places of all these iconic SNL cast members. Were the people that we hoped were going to step up. And I think so far that's been answered. We've seen Heidi and Ego really, put their foot on the pedal, hoping for Chloe to move up. And she seems to have done that. Bowen obviously is one of the stars of the show as well. And the hosts have all been so different, and every episode has been so very different. The tone doesn't match. I mean, you wouldn't know you were watching the same season if you just watched these out of order. But I'm a little worried about the writing. Some of it's a little low-hanging fruit. Some of it seems to be just looking for clicks. So have to keep gauging that and see where we go. It's always slow going at the beginning, especially with such a new cast. So we'll see what happens. And this last episode was mediocre as well. I mean, there was a decent amount of sketches. I feel like they tailored it a lot to Megan, and not sure if that was always good. Some of it was, but yeah, I mean, it was still a good show. A lot of highlights, and excited to talk about it.
Yeah, so we are excited to talk about it with you. And I agree in the fact that each episode has been so different. And I feel like we will, or I know I will look back on Miles Teller really like in a way of he was doing so much, and I think I wasn't aware of it at the time. Like he was doing, I mean, his Peyton Manning impression, he was just like fitting in like a glove with the cast. And then I feel like Brendan and Meg both had more the types of episodes where the host is standing out a lot, and it felt more tailored to the host, which is great. I mean, both were really fun. But I do think that like and we're going to talk about this, but I'm a little partial to the types of episodes where the host is just like kind of doing things that if the host weren't there, someone else would be filling the role. And there are moments where like the host is doing something better than anyone could do, like again the Peyton Manning impression. So every type of episode we've seen I think has its merits, and this one was no exception. I think I liked it. I think I was a little bit more high on it than you were, but in the context very much as this is the Meg Thee Stallion SNL episode. This is not an episode where the host is sort of like just kind of being a cast member who's really great and has standout moments and stand-in moments. But yeah, I'm with you. And the writing, I think, is we sometimes forget to talk about in these like these years of transition. As much as the cast members are transitioning, the writers are too. There is a huge transition with that, with Jost and Che formally not being head writers. Behind the scenes, I mean, Jost is still whipping out the cold opens most of the time, which I personally love a Jost cold open. I feel like he's really good at that. But that's another theme I think on this show that we're going to spend more time on, is how a transition year affects the writing and vice versa. So I think without further ado, we're going to get to our first segment, right? Anything else from you, Mike, before I jump into it, the screen time? Mike, you're on mute. And that's what's fun about the show being live.
Yeah. I was going to say, while you pull that up, I wanted to ask Bill if you have a preference for like all the SNL that you've seen. Are there hosts where you prefer that they write it around the host, or is that kind of a crutch?
I feel like most of the time it's too much of a crutch. One of the exceptions, I think, is like a Justin Timberlake, where you knew what you were getting when they came in, and that happens a lot with the longtime hosts, the ones who come back 3, 4, 5 times. A walk-in episode was always going to be a walk-in episode. A JT episode was going to be. So that doesn't bother me quite as much as something like Megan Thee Stallion, where too much of it was just her brand, in my opinion. I feel like you should have given her room to explore and do other things. So.
Yeah, no, totally. Because I mean, as for me, I watched the show Monday again to do the stats. And when I first watched the show, I was like, I kind of like really didn't like it. I was like, this is like a weaker episode, and I was like kind of bored. And I never get bored watching SNL. And I gotta say, I mean, I'm in a unique like perspective when I do the screen time, because I'm rewinding and looking at the background actor's reaction to a line or the delivery, and you kind of become like an expert of the sketch for 20 minutes of your life. You're like, know the sketch and all the beats and all the lines. And I definitely say in general, I always usually like the show more after I watch it, even not from an analytical point of view, but there was a lot more good in the episode than I originally thought when I watched it. So did you see it a couple times?
Yeah, and I agree with that completely, especially when I rewatch for, being on the podcast, and some of it on Saturday, I was taken out of the exercise sketch completely because of all the, technical errors. So, watching that and seeing the dress rehearsal and not having the errors, it was a lot funnier. So, yeah, I mean, definitely on a second or third watch, a lot of the times it'll hit me in a different way.
Cool. Yeah. Nicole, let's go ahead and debut the screen time.
Here we go. Mike, you want to read it out?
I think you should read it out.
Okay. Well, so of course, first we have Megan Thee Stallion at 24 minutes, 34 seconds. Then we have Ego Wodum, 10 minutes, 53 seconds. Heidi Gardner, 8 minutes, 40 seconds. Devin Walker, 8 minutes, 29 seconds. Chloe Fineman, 6 minutes, 57 seconds. Keenan Thompson, 6 minutes, 54 seconds. Punky Johnson, 6 minutes, 13 seconds. Michael Che, 4 minutes, 50 seconds. Colin Jost, 3 minutes, 56 seconds. James Austin Johnson, 3 minutes, 14 seconds. Bowen Yang, 3 minutes, 10 seconds. Andrew Dismukes, 2 minutes, 46 seconds. Molly Carney, 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Sarah Sherman, 2 minutes, 16 seconds. Mikey Day, 1 minute, 55 seconds. Ben Marshall, 1 minute, 4 seconds. Martin Herlihy, 51 seconds. Steve Higgins, 48 seconds. John Higgins, 45 seconds. Michael Longfellow, 26 seconds. And Marcelo Hernandez, 10 seconds. All right, Mike, first thoughts.
First thoughts, great work reading that out. That's better than I could have done. So that's my first thought. Yeah, I feel like I have to mention, I mean, since you went to me first, Devin Walker being up so high. I mean, that's a big rookie night. We're gonna talk about rookies a lot later, so I'll move on from that, but it should be said. Having like, north of 8 minutes is huge. Having 5 minutes on SNL is actually a really good night. So having over 8 is excellent. And then, our faves, Heidi and Ego being at the top. On our first episode of this season, I did some stats on like Heidi and Ego combos, and like they broke their combo record again. And we have a career high for Ego. So this is the most Ego we've ever seen on SNL this past week. But yeah, Bill, what do you think?
Couple thoughts come to mind. Nicole was talking about it last week about the lack of female hosts and how that changes the numbers. And wow, like, 3 out of the top 4, other than the host, are female, and then 4 out of the top 6. And Sarah, boy, she made a meal out of the 2 minutes and 16 seconds that she had. That cold open was so fantastic with her, and the other stuff that she was in as well. So I guess it's true that if there's a female host, the female cast members get more time. I guess that kind of really proves it.
Yeah, this was what I was hoping for when we were talking last week. And also what I was hoping for was when we were talking about Sarah and her screen time. Mike asked, we were talking about political impressions or what I wanted to see more of Sarah. And I said political impressions. And that's exactly what we got. And that was such an episode highlight for me, the Chuck Schumer. As a Jew from New York myself, I was just in heaven with this impression. Alex Moffat was amazing, but I think there's just something to be said for a Jew from New York, regardless of their gender, doing this impression. It's just like this certain thing about it is amazing. It's such a personal level is how I felt that. So I'm so happy that one of our prophecies from last week's By the Numbers came true. And I agree. I think Ego had a fantastic episode. Also a great episode for Punky. Just like amazing to see that. Also, Che is a little above Jost, which we saw in another episode this season and is statistically much less likely. So that's a new perhaps pattern that we're seeing. And then, another thing that I pointed out when I was reading out the numbers, but Steve Higgins being 3 seconds above his son is just kind of funny. And Steve fitting right in there in the Please Don't Destroy. He looks like he's one of them. And also in the chart, I italicize the all of the any technical cameos. And Please Don't Destroy count as cameos technically since they're not on the cast. So Steve is also italicized, not on the cast, and they just are all hanging out in that little circle right there, that little bubble. So, yeah. And any other notes on this one?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I want to jump in and also shout out Punky because you mentioned her career high for her as well. So her previous was 5:23, and now she's at 6:13 in this one. So it's cool that this season, I mean, I feel like it would be a bad thing if we weren't seeing everybody step up in the absence of the vets that just left and Cecily, who's missing right now. So it's cool to see like these big episodes for everybody. That we had a career high for Bowen last week, and career high in the first week. And then even the brand new rookies are improving on their career highs this early, like Devin Walker. So I want to just look at we did a poll on our socials about who you thought got the most screen time, and our listeners said Ego number 1, Heidi number 2. So they got those 2 right. Chloe number 3, and Keenan then Punky were the top 5 names we got. So no love for Devin on the poll. I'm surprised because he had the update spot. But that's what our listeners thought, and they're pretty much right on. They had that top 5 locked.
Yeah, I'll also
Yeah.
say with Ego, she had 67.74% of that. Who would you guess had the most screen time? And her MVP poll. We do an MVP poll every week that we talk about in more detail on the Monday night roundtables. And Ego was number one in that. She had 45% of that vote, so which is another huge lead. So as far as standout cast members, when you say the who would you guess had the most screen time and who was your MVP, for her to be just like miles above everyone else this episode, definitely the biggest standout episode by a singular cast member this season. Keenan, I think, just by a screen time perspective in episode 1 was a bit above Ego in this episode, but I still think she stood out the most out of any cast member so far in the season in a single episode, which was really cool to see. And the writing reflected that. You know, we talked about the writing credits, and those are it's just interesting to see, and so cool that when someone has so much screen time, they're also, in this case, writing a lot of those things. And it was just like such a dynamic, amazing episode for Echo.
Mike, not to put you on the spot, but how close to Chloe's all-time was she this week?
Not
have
too
any idea?
close.
No?
Yeah, I have the career highs open right now. Chloe's career high is 8:57.
Okay.
So 2 minutes exactly from her career high, which was season 46, episode 13, which was the Reggae Jean Page episode. She was in the monologue, and then she played the actress from Bridgerton later, and also anchored the cold open as Brittany. So that was a big night for Chloe. That was her career high. Great question.
I also would have thought we should do a segment of what did Nicole text Mike during the live show, because the last 2 weeks I think you mentioned when I said so-and-so broke their record, right? This week, if I had texted you during the live show, I would have said, oh, Chloe's this is her all-time highest screen time, right? 100% would have said that. And Ego was an obvious, like, phenomenal episode, but I definitely would have guessed Chloe as well. I think we forget that she has had a lot of really good episodes. I think for her more recently, I think we haven't seen her in as many sketches. She'll have these really standout moments, especially in pre-tapes. I'd say this season and the latter half of last season, most of her standout moments have been in pre-tapes, somewhat isolated from the live show of it all. But I think this episode showed that we could see another path where she is more involved in a large number of sketches and a lot of different types of sketches. And so that was great to see. She also is showing all of her raspy voice impressions right now on Instagram, which is just showing how dynamic she is. Her Joan Rivers impression, I feel like we don't see enough Joan Rivers impressions in general. And so, again, as a Jew from New York, I had to love that one. That was just incredible. So,
yeah, those were great. Check them out if you haven't. She also did Natasha Lyonne, which is cool.
Yep, amazing one. And she had I was at the dress rehearsal for the Natasha episode, and Chloe was doing just amazing work. The cigarette sketch, which I think where she was sort of doing a Natasha impression, it was cut and then it ended up being on YouTube, which I was thrilled about, because after seeing it during dress, I was like, it was just phenomenal. And so she showed a little bit of her Natasha Lyonne impression there, but now she was full steam with it, with the raspy, losing her voice. So that was great. And then, yeah, anything else on here? I mean, I can't
move on.
Yeah, I can't say enough how much I love to see so many women at the top. It's just great. And then, nothing against white men, but it is nice to see them take a backseat sometimes. And this episode was a perfect example of that. I think that the backseat was, it was warranted, and it had been a while. The first 2 episodes were so male dominated, and this was just very refreshing and wonderful. So many sketches were so female centric, and it was great.
Yeah, and down goes Mikey Day. He had a reign of terror of 8 episodes where he had 5 minutes or more, and now he's below 2. So sub 2 for Mikey. First time, I want to say, since the Zoe Kravitz episode, but he was on a hot streak. So if there's any episode from Mikey Day to maybe take a back seat, it's one hosted by a Black female rapper. So I think that makes sense. And we're seeing the women of color dominate that episode now. It just, makes sense. And, we love the line, as a white man, I couldn't review this 5 stars. So
Yes, that variety quote was perfect and very applicable to, especially shout out to John. Nothing against you, but as he has been reviewing the episode throughout the week in a few different forms, and here I am with two white men beside me in this podcast, and I think that is a perfect quote, and it was perfect for people like us who review the show to just have that quote in the episode, because I think it was hilarious and totally something I'm sure everyone who reviewed SNL this week in any form, in journalism, in podcasting, in recaps online, it was just a must mention. So anyways, we are now going to talk about the power rankings, which Mike, if you've been here the last few weeks, you know exactly what those are, but you want to give your weekly, one elevator pitch on what that is.
Yeah, for sure. It's a singular stat that I created to kind of simplify what it means to be an impact player on SNL. And I took the two most obvious stats that you could count, which are how long you appear on the show and how often you appear on the show. So I weight those with a lot of factors and make them into one number. That's what we get here.
Yep.
So we're looking at right
this is
now
cool.
average of 3 episodes. And just for fun, I just put up the actual scores because it's a small sample. It's only 3 episodes. So we see they're arranged by average from the highest to lowest, and across are just the actual scores from each episode.
Yep. So I can read these out for our audio listeners. Which should I do the episode 3 ones? Just read all those out.
I would just
Or
say
the average.
read out the average because we just talked about screen time as in like a singular episode. This is kind of just like looking at the season in like a nice chunk.
Yep, agreed. So, all right, here we go. Kenan Thompson is number 1 with 109.91. Ego Wodum falls not far behind at all with 109.52. Heidi Gardner at 105.53. Bowen Yang, 103.8. Chloe Fineman, 96 even. Andrew Dismukes, 80.79. Mikey Day, 80.45. Colin Jost, 71.22. Devin Walker, 63.75. James Austin Johnson, 59.14. Michael Che, 58.2. Punky Johnson, 49.92. Michael Longfellow, 44.95. Sarah Sherman, 44.68. Marcelo Hernandez, 30.03. And Molly Carney, 29.52. And what stands out to me the most about this, just briefly, is what I mentioned at the top, is that the top 2 people are so close together. I think is fascinating. With any metric that we talk about, often the first place has a one of the biggest legs up to the second place, and then there's more, there are shorter distinctions following that. And so I think it's so cool to see that Kenan and Ego are really both so close together, and it shows that Ego flew up this episode, but she's also been having great episodes in general. So that was cool to see. Mike, what else do you want to point out from this?
No, that's a great point. I think you're kind of alluding to it right there. But if you followed us last season, it was like not even close. It was just Kenan was on top of a mountain, and then in a valley was just 20 other cast members. So it's good to see him getting a little friendly competition from Ego Wodum, who's like, if you look at her scores, episode 1 about 83, episode 2 about 93, and this previous one 152.5, which is her best score ever. So we're seeing like Ego just be a consistent rock in this cast, and it just makes sense, with a vacancy of talented women leaving the show, that Ego would step up and fill that role. And then right behind her is Heidi Gardner, who's averaging over 100, and Bowen Yang averaging over 100. That's like, I've through the years gone through like what would be the cutoff, the Mendoza line. Shout out to Bill, big baseball fan, and Andy Hoagland, who's our first ever guest on By the Numbers, who asked me about that. What's the Mendoza line? And it's like, really, if you're getting over a 60 in the cast or a 55 even, that's a good episode. So if you're looking at the screen and you want to see all the individual numbers, I kind of I color coded them gradient red to green. So if it's a red episode, it's not your best, and if it's green, it's you did really well. So Bill, what are your thoughts?
Well, to give you another sports quote, they are who we thought they are. Like the people, Kenan's always going to be Kenan. and who we hoped would step into the void seems to be doing so at this point. Ego, Heidi, Bowen, Chloe, and Dismukes. The only one that concerns me, and I don't know if it's because I chose him in our draft, but James Austin Johnson being so low makes me a little nervous. We only have 1 or 2 episodes before the midterms. Is that going to be an effect? I mean, he's been in a couple of regular sketches, but yeah, he doesn't seem to be quite as high. I don't know if it's a sophomore slump yet, but yeah, but most of this seems to make sense. The rookies and the sophomores towards the bottom, and the superstars superstarring.
Yeah, and also James Austin Johnson had an update segment cut 2 weeks in a row, which isn't great. He has been sort of more like relegated to his political impressions for the most part, or just things of that kind of nature. If not a politician, then a character who feels politician-y. When we've seen so much more range from him before, and I would love to see more of it. But also, again, with November being a lot more political, I'm curious how his screen time will change, not just in more politically natured, politically driven sketches, but also if he will get a leg up in other areas. I remember, in fact, I will never forget from a data perspective, his first episode. I feel like we've talked about that every week so far. But I think that the show did a great job of introducing us to him that episode, not just from the literal start in the cold open, but then also weaved throughout the episode. He was all over the place, especially for a literal first episode cast member. So the show just did such a great job when he had that big moment in his first episode. We got to know him in other arenas as well and other types of sketches. And I am curious to see, and I want to know what you guys think, if something similar will happen when he's in more front and center in whatever political impressions he takes on. And I assume he will for the midterms for November. So do you guys think that he will be, when he has more screen time politically, will that correlate with his screen time elsewhere? Bill, what do you think?
I think it will. I think we started to see that late last season, when he was doing his Biden-Trump carousel. And, we started to see him being put into those husband roles or the father roles. And, we saw a little bit of that this week. He was in the deer sketch, but he didn't have a lot to do. So, I mean, again, I'm concerned, he needs to find another niche, I think, besides Trump and Biden. Is it going to be Ron DeSantis? Is it going to be, are they going to him like they used to go to Dana Carvey and say, we need such and such by the end of the week. Don't care if you know how to do it. Sit down and figure out how to do it. Or are they just going to keep him in this box? So it's a really interesting question.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I'd like to see JJ find something on the show that is unique to him. We've had plenty of great cast members who do amazing political impressions, and he could be the best. I mean, he up there with Dana Carvey, in my opinion, with his accuracy. But yeah, I would love to see him. And people talk a lot about that Home Brothers with Gyllenhaal, that sketch, and how he played that character so well. So something like that, maybe. But yeah, Bill, don't fret. His average last year was a 50.5. So he's actually performing better on average this season than last. But it is true, he hasn't really had a bunch of like lead roles. Even both of his Trump appearances have been like in a supporting capacity, when typically they're the center of the sketch. And then yeah, he was in the deer sketch, and a little bit. Oh, he was in the Chloe Feynman Marilyn Monroe sketch. So both in supporting capacity, not really delivering a ton of punchlines in those sketches, kind of just being a solid, as I call them, A, B, C, D. That's like a solid right down the middle B. Like you're there on stage the whole time, but you're not like the center of it. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about JAJ, especially when there's going to be probably lots of cold opens that he's going to anchor.
Yes, agreed. All right, anything else that we want to talk about from here?
No, I think let's move on.
We're good. All right, let's move right along. So we are going to talk about, Mike, you want to introduce this as I pull it up?
Sure. It's a segment that I've kind of danced around on the show for a while, and like I just kind of wanted to like just put it out there and have let's talk about double duty hosts. Just because we just had one and we're gonna about to have another one, and had a few last year, and I was just kind of like, it's still a lot of data I have that I haven't really dug into too much, but I figured that we'd look at so just I cut it off at 2,000. So there's a lot, gonna see a lot of names on the screen. Not gonna read them all out, but just especially recently, like even since season 45, we've had Chance the Rapper, Harry Styles, Nick Jonas, Billie Eilish, Lizzo, Megan Thee Stallion, and now Jack Harlow. So it's definitely becoming more of a trend, and I would kind of just want to know, Nicole and Bill, your opinions on double duty hosts. Do you think it changes the show in any way, from the eyeball test? And we can get into the stats of it, and yeah, then at the end I'll talk about a stat that I came up with. But Bill, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, I think they do tend to lean into tailoring the show more towards the guests. I don't know if that's to make them more comfortable or if they want to keep them on their brand. So it's kind of a mixed bag as I look at this list. Boy, some of these, I mean, I couldn't tell you 1 second of the Ludacris episode. I can't remember anything from that. But and Bieber is one of the worst episodes of all time, in my opinion. But beyond that, I mean, I think Miley Cyrus is one of the best double duty hosts we've had in the last decade. Donald Glover, would love to see him come back either as a host or a musical guest. Chance the Rapper was a great episode for Halloween that year. So yeah, I think most of the episodes are pretty good. I think it's just like any other host. Some of them are going to be duds. And I don't think it takes away from the fact that they happen to be a gigantic music star.
Mike, you're on mute again.
You guys just answered my question exactly. I was going to ask you about if you remember any double duty hosts poorly, or you had any favorites. So thanks for that. But
my favorites, JT. I mean, and if you're going to go all the way back, Paul Simon was the OG. I mean, his episodes were always so fantastic that you wouldn't even recognize them as a current fan if you're under a certain age, because they do 5 or 6 songs. But yeah, I mean, JT, Paul Simon. I really loved Billie Eilish's episode last year. I think that was one of the better episodes of last year.
Yeah, I agree. And from a data perspective, I was looking at Megan Thee Stallion versus our last host, Brendan Gleeson. I thought it was kind of interesting that her power ranking score was like 298.99, and his was 299.3. So like they almost had an identical score for completely different hosts, and Brendan Gleeson didn't have 2 musical performances to pad his screen time numbers. And last week, I think my opening take was about how that episode was really open, and there was a lot of room, and it was pretty more long shots and less people on screen, that type of thing. So I was just looking at the numbers that go into that, and I think it's because first of all, Megan Thee Stallion's first performance was very short. I think it was the shortest since Pushin' P with Gunna. So that was a quick one. But yeah, I just thought that was really interesting that it was so close right there. And I think it's because, my opinion on it is that musicians coming in who've never hosted before, they're not actors like Brendan Gleeson. So I was looking at his episode again. He was the lead in like all his sketches, other than the Sarah Sherman 10-1. So that definitely made his score higher, where Megan wasn't in a PDD pre-tape and was supporting in a couple of them, lead in and most of them. But that was my data analysis on it. But comparing to Miles Teller, who had a 362.6, so that was a huge episode, and mainly because he was in the cold open. But Nicole?
Yeah, I was going to say also just the pure screen time. Miles Teller had 2.5 minutes more than Meg, including the fact that Meg had 2 musical performances, which is crazy. And I feel like she had a strong episode. So again, I feel like for her to have a solid episode and for Miles Teller to be 2.5 minutes above her, I think in the context of the whole season, once we have all of the hosts to analyze and compare, I think Miles Teller, we're going to be like, oh my God, he was amazing. And we didn't even talk enough about it at the time. I just feel like I might, when it's all said and done, I feel like he's going to definitely be in my top 4 hosts of the season. I would be shocked if he's not. But, and again, that's someone, as I've said, I wasn't that excited about him. I didn't see Top Gun. I wasn't like so hype on him. I thought he would be a lot more basic, honestly, than he was, and he showed so much range. So, yeah. But anyways, this list is really interesting, and I agree. I feel like Miley is the ultimate in the modern era, the ultimate double duty performer, someone who has that charisma and charm and energy and personality and like individuality. I would say that double duty is known for. The concept, I feel like, is so designed to showcase someone as a personality and just as a brand, really. I think if we're talking about like branding, and the first episode got some flack, I feel like, for it felt like a bunch of ads, like 4 sketches had brands directly attached to them, and I feel like double duty is just as much of a branding opportunity, and it's just for a person, not a company. But Miley is just always incredible at being so Miley, and there are sketches that are, or anytime she's been on the show, in addition to her double duty, but there are sketches about, oh, this is Miley's thing. This is something no one else could do. It's all her and her specifically. But then she can also glide right into a sketch and be a part of the ensemble. And I think that is really rare with double duty, honestly. I'm someone who prefers not double duty. And I love music. I love so many of these people that we're looking at, all these names. But I just think that there's so much asked of you when you're a double duty that it's almost like it's almost impossible to really immerse yourself into the fabric of the show, because you're just spread so thin, especially a week like Meg Thee Stallion, which is, as she's mentioned online, her house was broken into less than 24 hours before the show. I mean, she had a lot going on with or without like such a traumatic event. So I think that the show thrives when we do have double duty mixed into it every now and then. We talked about the stat that this is the first time in SNL history that there are 2 consecutive double duty hosts, and I feel like it hasn't been true until now for a reason. I think that it is just such a certain type of episode that I like when it happens twice a season, and those 2 times are separated by many months. I think it's fun. It's a break from the usual, but I'll see how I feel. I guess it's nice that there's a break week. That would be crazy if there weren't a break week between the 2. But yeah, looking at this list, I would say Miley Cyrus jumps out. Taylor Swift also, and she was so young. It was so long ago that she did it, and she did such a great job. Especially, she doesn't have a lot of acting credits to her name, and the ones she does have, there was like a viral tweet going around just showing all the movies that Taylor Swift has been in and how low their scores are on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's obviously barely about her because she has, she's not an actress. She has such small roles in most of these films, but someone was like, maybe you shouldn't be acting. Maybe that's not your calling. Because all of the movies she's been in are so poorly reviewed. But despite that, she's not by any means an actress. And yet she was great. I guess you could say her music videos are really full of acting and charm. And her current era, I think, or her last era of music was a lot of storytelling from other perspectives, not her own experience. So I would say that's a form of acting and immersing yourself into other roles and other people's experiences in life. So I think she was great. Drake had a lot of standout moments, I feel like. I think that we haven't talked about Drake on SNL in a while, but he, in general, but he was great. Who else? Ariana Grande, I feel like, is amazing and an example of someone who shows that she has range, and so she's just so talented in so many different ways. I'll point out one more, and then I'll be done. I would say I would say Lizzo. Last year I think was super strong with Billie and Lizzo, and she was great. And her just above all else enthusiasm about being there really showed. She was saying on social media that she's already hoping to get the five-timer jacket, and to be referencing that online and to be Lizzo, I feel like she has to be such a fan of the show and maybe of our show. I could see Lizzo being a By the Numbers head because if you're thinking about that jacket, you're thinking about the numbers. So I wouldn't count Lizzo out. If you're listening, maybe Lizzo is too.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree on Miley.
You're
I'd
like,
love to
probably
see her.
not.
I'm like,
You
well, I'm
never
just I was
know.
yeah, with Miley, I feel like we even like had kind of a fan theory that she could have stepped in to host for Elon Musk if for some reason, he might been he's kind of a wild card and he was like couldn't do it. Miley could step in and I feel like she's always, comes in like a wrecking ball when she's hosting and like we can't stop her from climbing to the top of the rankings and that kind of stuff. So I was looking at the total screen time of double duty hosts without their music and I was like, are they in less, whatever? And I was like, all right, so Lizzo is 1956, Megan 17.6, Billie Eilish 1859, Nick Jonas 13:45, Harry Styles was big 21:5, and that averaged out to be 18 minutes 26 seconds. So like in comparison, it's definitely not a Sudeikis or a Mulaney, but they're decent. But look at like Jake Gyllenhaal got 22 minutes, and Gerard Carmichael got 23, Oscar Isaac 22. So overall, they are in a little bit less sketch when they're doing double duty. And then finally, my fun stat was I was thinking, and I think this was inspired by at that Sammy K. So on the round table about do we think double duty hosts are typically people that have like been on the show recently or at all? And so I looked at all these double duty hosts that are on the screen right now since 2000, and almost all of them were on the show previously. So fun trivia, if you're listening along, is who were the last two hosts on that were never on SNL and then asked to do double duty? That's a pretty big ask when you're not a friend or trusted of the show, and it's Donald Glover and Blake Shelton were not previously hosted or musical guest on SNL and then debuted on for double duty, and then we haven't seen them since. And so I was looking at that, and then I was like, all right, well, since they're mostly yeses, my actual stat was 28 of the last 31 double duty hosts had musical guest or hosted before, so 90% of them. So that like spoke for itself. And I was like, what? How long since they've been on the show last? So that's what the far right column is the years since they last appeared on the show, either as a host or musical guest. And it averaged out to be 2.4 years about average. And I dropped out Elton John because that was the outlier of 29 years. When Johnny Cash hosted, he was a musical guest. And I was like, all right, if I have this information, and I'm like, all right, well, how old is a musical guest double duty host when they get asked that? And they're about 29.6 years old. So I haven't appeared on SNL before, but I am 29.6 years old. So I have one of those two things. And then I was like, all right, can I use these two pieces of data to predict a double duty host? And I bet if we did this last week, Jack Harlow would have probably stood out. Not necessarily
Absolutely.
on these specific stats, but I was looking at them like, oh, there's like 6 candidates right away. Adele, Camila Cabello, Lil Nas X, Kid Cudi, Bad Bunny, and Dua Lipa. I feel like any of those 6 could easily be double duty next year, and they'd be right on the timeline and mostly right on age. What do you think, Bill? I see you nodding a lot.
No, I mean, and we've mentioned all of those people as people we wanted to host. So it's fascinating. I mean, I think the bookers must be sitting there by the stage watching the musical guests and trying to figure out if they can book them for the next year because, I mean, these stats don't lie, right? I mean, so close, between 1 and 2.5 years mostly, where they came back and did double duty. So that's really, really fascinating. I would love to see Adele come back and do double duty. So That would be my pick out of those, or Dua Lipa. I mean, either one of them would be fantastic.
Yep, I agree. Also, a lot of them have been when they were musical guest or just host, which is a separate conversation because some have been host and then do double duty. But a lot of these appeared in sketches when they were musical guests, and I think if we were predicting week to week when there's a host and musical guest, I think we'd have a pretty good track record of guessing, will this musical guest appear in sketches? I think people, on this show, I feel like we can guess based on vibes, based on if they have certain connections at the show, if they're friends with certain people, doing projects with certain people. I think that is something that we can kind of have a feel for whether that will happen. And then that is, I think, a really good predictor. If someone has that sort of vibe and they appear in a sketch and then they can prove themselves that way, if they're a musical guest and they show their comedy chops, it's kind of like an audition, I guess. If you're a musical guest and you have a sketch appearance and you do a good job, then if you want to do double duty, I would guess that you would have that chance. Well, no, I think actually not quite. Yeah, I would say not. That's kind of extreme because it is such an honor. This list is long, but I would say of all the musical guests who have a decent sketch appearance and then want to do double duty, I don't think that they all have that chance. So I was a bit jump the gun there, but yeah, Jack Harlow for sure. I'll also throw in this new trend of the Fallon co-hosts. I knew that Jack Harlow was going to be double duty the second I saw him co-hosting Fallon, right after Meg had co-hosted Fallon a few months prior. I was like, okay, yep, the time is adding up. This all makes sense. I was like, that's got to be it. And that one I saw coming. I'll say the first 3 of the season I didn't see coming, but Jack Harlow, Meg I could have maybe given the Fallon thing, but Jack, I feel like from a data perspective, so many things made perfect sense, and it was his time, and it is his time. And also, I mean, the Halloween episode I think is fun for like an F-boy type. I want him to do a ghosting sketch. I think that would be really fun with some sort of double entendres thrown in about ghosting and ghosts. I think there's a lot of fun to be had there. Some like silly, stupid writing mixed in with some kind of intelligent wordsmithy writing. So that would be great. Also, Halsey Monette in the chat pointed out that she was a good performer, and I agree. In terms of surprises, before she was on, I wouldn't have guessed that she would deliver such range and so much comedy and amazing. I thought she was one of the best. And so yeah, I think she deserves to be mentioned as well.
Yeah, I just want to say if Jack Harlow is a good sport, they should do a Narnia sketch where he plays Mr. Tumnus, and so I think that would be great for a Halloween episode. So just get him a red scarf, and he can do that, and you can include other characters.
Don't trigger the Swifties who wanted Taylor to be on this week, because there was the October 22 was never on the official schedule for this year, but it has not stopped Swifties from wanting to. I mean, it is already Wednesday, and there are Swifties tweeting Taylor Swift on SNL this weekend, please. Like, it is too late, but the Swifties can dream forever. It'll be Saturday morning, and they'll be like, "Is it too late? Please make it happen."
And actually, Taylor has the record on here for the quickest double duty ask. So she was the musical guest with Neil Patrick Harris, and then on here it says 0.82 years later was asked to do double duty. She hosted and musical guest. That was great.
Yeah.
Actually, the last movie I saw in theaters had Taylor in it. I'm not going to say what it was, but it wasn't that great.
Oh yeah, I know what movie it was. I don't think it'll be that great. I'm not going to see it. Also, just a quick mention that
had
Matt
animals
in
the
chat.
title.
Oh, not what I thought it was going to be. Okay. It also had someone else who's in the news right now, right? Or maybe he was on Broadway, the version of it or whatever. James Corden. But Matt in the chat, who works with us on graphic design, doing an amazing job. He mentioned Paul Simon. Is he really double duty? As Bill mentioned him. So I just had to bring up that little point of contention.
Well, Yes. Yeah. Again, this is an enigma. I mean, he's not even technically a five-timer. Let's not get that whole debate
Yes.
started. So, but yeah, no, he was George Harrison one time, and I can't think of the other music guest off the top of my head, but he sang on all of those episodes, so I'm counting it.
Fair enough. It is. Yeah, we have a few points. We are so data driven here, but there are some things where the data will have many opinions. It is, and Paul Simon finds himself there. He is the king of subjective data around here. So he makes Mike's job, I guess, a little more difficult, and our job analyzing the data a little more difficult, a little more interesting. So thank you, Mr. Simon. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I did blow the SNL stats conch shell this week and brought together some of the top minds to get a definitive double duty list. So I do have it, and what would be the designations of, oh well, just because they sang a song doesn't mean they're double duty and that kind of thing. So definitely Paul Simon was brought up a lot in that meeting.
Yes, that a very official meeting. All right. Anything else on here? Also in the chat, let us know who your favorites are if you haven't already, because I think this list is very dynamic and very subjective because double duty episodes vary so much. So I'm curious what everyone's favorite was, or one that you didn't like. I would be curious to hear. But anything else on this before we move on?
No, let's talk rookies.
We're good. Let's talk rookies.
So Bill, I want to open up with you about what you think, not only about the rookies themselves, but do you think SNL has been treating their rookies differently, or is that the eyeball test talking, or what do you think? Do you think that they've softened up in their old age? That's what I said last week, or the first week is like, SNL just turned 47. It's in its 48th season. Maybe we're like, oh, everyone should get a trophy. What do you think?
I heard you say that last week, and I agree with that. It feels that way. As someone who goes back to the Jay Morris, Sarah Silverman days, where you wouldn't see them, you didn't even know they were still in the cast because you wouldn't see them for 5-6 weeks as rookies. So it does seem like they're trying to give everybody a cookie, and I don't think that's necessarily bad. I think we need to see these people shine and see what they can do. But if you look at it, and as far as is it good to have a good start, Aristotle had a good start, and he was pretty even with Sarah. I don't know numbers wise. I'm sure you'll be able to pull this up. Going into the winter break, it felt like Sarah and Aristotle were pretty even, and then came back and she did meatballs, and he fell off the face of the earth. And the rest, as they say, is history. So I don't know. Is it better to burn out or to fade away, as the old Def Leppard song goes? But I'm very happy to see every one of the rooks got a chance to do something. Hopefully Molly gets on Weekend Update and completes the foursome of that. And hopefully all four of them continue to shine. I mean, Devin's numbers this past episode were so fantastic and so great to see.
Yeah, I will say I think we have to, right? We have to see Molly on Update. Then it would be 4 in a row, and every rookie would be accounted for in the first 4 weeks. And for this class of rookies, all are stand-ups. I think that it's only right. So I would love to see that. I feel like I could see, Jack Harlow will probably be too busy to go on Update, but I just feel like that could be funny, is like Molly and Jack Harlow doing something together. I am envisioning that. I would love to see something with that. Also, just a note on the rookies and everyone getting a cookie. I think with introducing this new era, ushering it in, I think it is really nice consistency and encouraging the audience to visualize the new era and to really get acquainted with it. I think it is nice to not have shutouts wherever possible. And I say that as someone who was when we did our cast draft, I am suffering as a result of the lack of shutouts because one of my 2 people is Michael Che. I learned my lesson not to put myself first in a 2-round snake draft in any capacity, because I will get the last pick. And no offense to Michael Che, but of course, when you do sketch appearances, you don't want an update anchor who does not appear in sketches most of the time. So I suffered a big blow with my decision. I got to choose where I got to put myself, and I put myself first. But Bowen is carrying the team, which is great. But because of that, with every rookie, at first I was like, I think because there are a lot of rookies, maybe some shutouts will help me. With Michael Che being one of my, I know I can count on him on one sketch an episode, and some rookies are going to put up some zeros, and they haven't been really. So they haven't been, period. So it is hurting me as someone in this draft that we did, but I really like it. I think it's nice to make sure that there aren't shutouts wherever possible, assuming people are all in the building, obviously excluding Cecily, who has not been in the building until now. We will see her soon. But yeah, Mike, you want to explain what's going on the screen here?
Yeah, now that was actually my alternate opening take, was going to be that there's been a perfect attendance at all the shows because, Cecily's not in the intro. So as far as I'm concerned, statistically, she's not in the cast right now. She, joins, and I'll put up her numbers.
That is another point of contention.
Well, I just think it's like, if you introduce somebody, they're in the show, and then they're not in the show, then they get a 0. But we've had everybody appear, which I like. I just, I think it's fun to, if we saw Marcelo for 10 seconds last week, but I was glad to see him. It was, after he had a great shining moment the week before. So on the screen is our rookie check-in. We go back a few seasons to season 45. We have all the rookie classes of Bowen and Chloe, and then Lauren, Andrew, and Punky. Last season, Sarah, Aristotle, and JAJ, and now our 4 rookies this season. I put up their screen time for their first 3 episodes. Those are the first 3 columns. Their total screen time in that span, what their average was, because as we've seen, Michael Longfellow week 1, Devin Walker this week, and like I just said, Marcelo week 2. And then what people who have already gone through a rookie season, what ended up being their average, because it's kind of a question here tonight is it better to have a hot start, or is it, better to kind of just get better as the season goes? So that's what the next column is, their ultimate average. And then I figured it might be fun to say, like, when did they peak in the rookie year? Was it early in the season or not? So I put their episode number that they had their peak in. For JAJ, as we mentioned, Nicole mentioned, was in his first episode, and to this day is his career high. So that's pretty rare, I would imagine. But that's what we're looking at. Yeah, Bill, what do you think?
I'm just going to read them out for our audio listeners before we give any opinions.
Sure.
I won't forget about you, good old audio listeners. We love you too. Okay, here we go. So I'll do it by what do you think, by the total for episodes 1 through 3, Mike?
Sure, that works. Yeah, they're both sorted by total and then subsequently by average. It's the same thing. So that's what we're looking at.
Right. Cool. Okay. Well, it will come as no surprise. Number 1 for first 3 episodes, James Austin Johnson, 13 minutes, 39 seconds. Devin Walker, 11 minutes, 8 seconds. Michael Longfellow, 6 minutes, 46 seconds. Sarah Sherman, 6 minutes, 21 seconds. Bowen Yang, 5 minutes, 28 seconds. Molly Carney, 4 minutes, 57 seconds. Marcelo Hernandez, 4 minutes, 23 seconds. Aristotle Latari, 4 minutes, 22 seconds, 1 second behind. And Andrew Dismukes, 3 minutes, 20 seconds. Punky Johnson, 2 minutes, 45 seconds. Chloe Feynman, 2 minutes, 40 seconds. And Lauren Holt, 1 minute, 48 seconds. All right, Bill, opinions.
I don't know that you can have a definitive answer for whether it means you're going to last, right? I mean, look at Dismukes, Punky, Chloe, all behind poor Aristotle. And, Dismukes could be considered one of the stars of the show at this point. But yeah, I mean, not a lot of surprises, nothing that really stands out that makes me go, oh, wow. But yeah, I'd say that, and look at the evenness of the people other than Devin who started this year. So that's pretty interesting, and be fun to see where they go for the rest of this season.
Mike, what about you? You're on mute. Mike, what is it today?
I think it's actually on the microphone. I think it's everybody. I think everyone's surprised that we've seen the rookies this much. I guess that's my overall take. But yeah, I mean, I did a percentage change on these two, and I'm like, okay, Aristotle was, had a a minute 27 average an episode. That's totally, cool for a rookie. It's not that bad. And then it went down 48% to 45 seconds a show because of the shutouts and all that. So, but yeah, I mean, Dismukes, like he missed the second episode and things like that happen. So I think my take on looking at it from the data is, if you have a bad start, it's not that big of a deal, and you have so much time. But I think it depends. Mostly is the behind the scenes and like fostering the relationships with the cast and the writers, because that's we don't have a bad start on that. Because if all of a sudden people start pairing off and the clicks start in the writer's room and you're left out, he might not have a chance to get your starring moment on the show. So it's funny that Sarah had a lead in the 10-1 in her first episode, and then her peak was at the end of the season. So bookends are probably the best. Shout out Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah, I'll also say a note that I think the first person on the list and the last person highlight the best is if you come onto the show to do something very specific, or when the show looks at you to do something very specific, like they'll just do it from the jump. So James Austin Johnson, our Trump and our Biden, like, yeah, right out the gate, they knew exactly where to use him, what to use him for, and he was there. And I think Lauren Holt suffered because by the end of her season, it was sort of like she didn't have really a place that people knew how to use her or collaborate with her. I think that was a big struggle for her. Whereas even like Aristotle, I think he, by the end of his season, it was clear we could see clearly the fact that we knew when he does these, these certain characters that he has, that can be a place that people like and respond to. And so hypothetically, in an alternate universe, he would still be there doing his one-off characters and update features and things like that, and maybe not being as collaborative with the rest of the cast, but still that is something that is you can point out of, oh, right, that's how he's used. Even if it's not the best usage, I think ideally you want to be used in a collaborative sense and be thought of to be written into things or to collaborate writing things with other people. But I think the key thing in doing well in your first 3 episodes is when people know how to use you, whether that's when you're hired to do something specific, when you come into it, having a lot of friends and good relationships at the show, any of those things I think play the biggest role with this. And and then I guess everyone in the middle is somewhere in between. A lot of people who ended up really standing out, but then, I mean, like a lot of things do, maybe it took a little bit of time, and there's nothing wrong with that for sure. This data confirms that there is nothing definitely wrong with falling somewhere in the middle of this list or even towards the bottom of this list, because a season is way longer than 3 episodes. So there are a lot of implications that are can be drawn beyond this list. But also, yeah, second and third place being current rookies. It's really cool that we're looking at this now. I'm sure we'll look at something similar at the end of the season, even a little later into the season, and we'll see how it shifts. So I'm really curious to see next time we look at something like this.
And to piggyback off of that, Nicole, we have a Superfan episode coming up next Monday. Shameless plug, and we're doing best rookie moments, and it's interesting to see some of the biggest stars that have ever been on the show have come right out of the gate. A Will Ferrell in his first episode, a Dana Carvey in his first episode, and some other people, 12th, 13th episode before you saw them really shine. And they ended up being on the show 5, 6, 7 years. So it's a nice indicator to start with, and you definitely have to get your foot in the door. But I don't think it's a death knell for anybody at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Great point. Looking forward to that show, Bill. And I think maybe an indicator is like you don't want to have a slump. So I have some slump stats up my sleeve. So I think that's probably a great indicator of like, okay, you can have boom and bust all the time, even if you're the star. Even Kate McKinnon once in a while would have a show that she had under 3 minutes, and I think it was the Reggae Jean Page that she was like a little bit part in the pirate sketch and a little bit part in the driver's license sketch, and I was like, oh, it's almost fun to see Kate a little bit and here instead of leading everything. So I think, yeah, if you go for long periods of time where you're in the building and not anything, that probably is a really bad sign. But we did mention that, like, what if we were talking, what if we were doing this weekly by the numbers show last season? I feel like people would be really excited about Aristotle. So I think it's kind of fun. I kind of equate SNL with the NFL season a lot because it's like week to week, and a lot of teams don't figure out what they are for the first month of the season, and it's really easy to overreact and be like, this team's a wagon. They have a great offense or a great defense. And with SNL, it's kind of similar. It's like we don't know what we have yet. People are going to fit in certain spots, and we don't know what they are yet. So I love it because it's a ton of numbers, but it's also just it's a really fun ride, I think. So I think we should move on, but we'll check on the rookies again later this season for sure.
I do have to say, since you reminded me, you talked about sports, which I usually don't think about, but now I was reminded that ESPN today dropped a That's So Raven themed NBA promo, and I was obsessed with it. And I am just putting it out into the ether again that I think that Heidi and Ego should take on a WNBA parody of the That's So Raven NBA thing. And I think also Punky, it would be a perfect opportunity for her Brittany Griner impression to make the show. I would love to see that. And then I think it could just get into some really good kind of dark comedy, dark humor about how Brittany Griner is where she is. I just think it could be some good commentary on that. But also it would just also be fun. And so I just am putting that out there. I think it could be maybe instead of that. So that we have the NBA That's So Raven. Maybe we get like WNBA Wizards of Waverly Place or something. I think that'd be amazing. But anyways, so we are gonna move on. Everyone feel good about this convo. We're gonna wrap it up. Okay, so now we're gonna do the segment where we highlight a cast member from the episode, whether it's because we think they had an amazing episode, we wish they had a better episode, we just think that from a data perspective it's an interesting episode. So Mike, I will start with you. Which cast member do you want to talk about?
I chose the aforementioned Punky Johnson. Thought she had a great night. I think Punky Johnson was, she was on the bubble last year, and it was like, SNL doesn't really do like two and dones, like they kind of do a one and done or you're in the cast. So she got upgraded to repertory. I was happy to see that because Punky Johnson kind of had that Melissa Villaseñor thing of like, we know that you're good, but like you're not being used very well or very often. And then, Punky popped off in this episode and got a career high. So I think it was a great opportunity to bring her up. And, that talk about slumps, like Punky last year was having some rough stretches where like she wasn't getting in anything. So I just wanted to bring her to the table and say, go Punky. And I don't know if it's going to, I see a trend arising that she's going to be a regular sketch player because I don't know if that's really her game. But I think I think I wanted to highlight the classroom sketch because when I was doing screen time for that, I was like, damn, Punky's acting in this is like so good. And I just wanted to give her a shout out of like that she's really talented outside of just being funny, because if you're on SNL, I hope you're funny. Like no one's gonna be like, they're not funny to anyone who's ever been on the show, basically. But her reactions in the background and her delivery of lines, also, I loved seeing anytime Ego plays a really dumb character, I think she's like so good at it because she usually plays like, a hot girl or a cool person. So when she plays someone who's really dumb, it's always like wicked funny to me. But Punky in the background as a supporting player.
I have to cut you off, Mike, and just compliment you, implying that hot girls and dumb people are two separate categories and that there is no overlap there. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, the Venn diagram,
at a later
can be narrow or wide. But yeah, thank you. But that's the person I want to bring up. So we don't have to dwell on too long because we talked about how it's her career high. And she was in the Girl Talk sketch, and she was in the Hot Girl Hospital sketch, and it was obviously because it was a big woman episode for the cast. So you're gonna rely on your women in the cast for sure. So that goes without saying. But if Nicole or Bill, if you have any punky remarks, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say, I think also specifically Black women, I think that a lot of the content was so specifically like, I just felt like Ego's voice, especially, again, who I will talk about later, but I feel like it was just so much from a certain perspective, which I love to see. I think, as I've said, very white man heavy first 2 episodes. And so this was just so amazing to see different perspectives. And yeah, Punky had an amazing episode and proved that she can really, again, we're talking about in our rookie segment, we talked about how what's most important in having longevity on the show is just when the show knows how to, utilize you, whether you know how to be utilized, other people around you know how to take advantage of your talent and collaborate with you, all of those things. And I think Punky showed a lot of range in types of roles, in types of, amounts of screen time in a certain sketch, because sometimes, like a Keenan, perfect example, it's like you could have the least screen time in the sketch out of anyone and make the biggest impression. Keenan obviously is king of that, but I think Punky did a great job of, whether she had a small role in a sketch, a big role in a sketch, she just showed that she can really fit in seamlessly in anything. And I love to see that. And I hope that this momentum carries on when we are back to the white men hosts. For Jack Harlow, we are back there 3 for 4 on those white men this season, which, it's I would love not so many, but I think Jack he'll be good. He'll be good. Anyways, so I hope the momentum continues, because she had a really very different episode 2 from episode 3. Her episode 2 was not a lot going on, so it was great to see that rise, and I hope that we continue to see a lot from her in the next episodes, and that, like, when I hope it wasn't this sort of, like, frankly, like a tokenism thing of like, oh, this is the episode where Punky is gonna, be written into things and be, her things are gonna get traction, whatever. I hope that, like, regardless of who the host is, that Punky gets that time and gets all of that attention that she deserves to be a part of a lot of different things at the show.
Yeah, I don't know how much more I can add than the both of you have, but I'm very happy for her. She definitely, it seems to be one of the classic cases of the show doesn't know what to do with her. She has these great shining moments. She had that great 10-1 towards the end of last season. And she's very funny. I mean, out of all the people that have been brought on the show in the last 4 or 5 years, she was one of the ones I was the highest on, because she was always on Spade's Comedy Central show, and she was so damn funny on there. And, to see somebody like that come on to SNL and just not have a lot to do is always disheartening. But, hopefully, as Nicole said, this is the start of something really good, and we get to see the momentum build from this, because that 9 seconds and that really sad look on her face on the Good Nights last week was just soul crushing. So let's hope this is the beginning of something great.
For sure. And before I throw to Bill for his pick, on this show, we do numbers, and sometimes they look good, sometimes they don't. And, we've had over 900 episodes of our favorite show, and 20 of them have been hosted by Black women. So I'll just throw that out there. It's like, that's not a high number. I mean, I don't do the pull up the calculator for that one. But so I think that's, even if you liked the Meg Thee Stallion episode, thought, or didn't like it, it's like it naturally lends itself to opportunities for people in the cast. And it's funny to even have, to have a foil to that host too. It's like, it's not just like white host, white cast, black host, black cast. It's not even about that. It's just like, it gives new opportunities, new avenues for the writers to put people in situations. That's what we're doing here. We're doing sketch comedy where people are getting in the costume and walking onto set. So I think that's for sure SNL is getting better at that every year. I did a metric on diversity last year, and like, even if they're not moving fast enough, they are moving in the right direction. But to have a Black female host is like definitely something that we should see, shouldn't have to wait till next year or the year after to see again. So with that being said, Bill, I want to hear who your pick is and why.
I'd like to talk about Chloe Fineman. Going into the season, one of my bigger worries, because you become attached to these cast members as if you know them. I mean, Mike knows this from sports. You get attached to these people kind of crazily and to see what's happened to her the last year or so was disheartening. And I was afraid we were going into another Melissa situation where they brought her back, but they still don't use her. And she's so talented, such a great impressionist, such a great comedian. And to see her get as much time as she did, and to see her paired with Heidi twice, is this the late in Heidi's career pairing like Adie and Kate were? Because, it was always Adie and Cecily at the beginning of their careers. And then eventually it kind of moved to, it was always the Adie and Kate pairing. So I loved their dynamic together. I loved to see what Chloe was able to do. And even though Sarah stole the performance in the cold open, her Chloe's Nancy Pelosi was spot on, fantastic, perfect. Even if she was just quoting what was actually said, right down to the poo-poo. It was so great, and I hope we get to see more of that this season.
Yeah, I agree. I think also what I was saying with how she was starting to, I felt like we talk again every week. We'll write a list of things that come up every week on the show, but the Will Forte episode I think is one, and how interesting that was from a data perspective, where it certain things felt so dissonant from each other, like the Forte and Kristen heavy stuff, and then the current cast member heavy stuff felt so like two separate things. And I think that with Chloe, some of her pre-tapes have felt a little bit like that, where it's like it feels a little bit like this different thing going on at the show that has like a different vibe, and it's Chloe centric, and maybe there aren't so many other people in it, or if they are, it feels sometimes not better or worse, but a lot of those have felt like a different show. And I would say equally good, and it's often better. But just like for me, a lot of them felt like they were these like standalone pieces of media. And so that was something that I liked, because I feel like she's really been shining consistently in those platforms. Again, like as I mentioned, the Inventing Chloe sketch, the Nicole Kidman, things like that are what I'm talking about. And so I was kind of worried about that. As much as those were great, it's you never want to see cast members feel like they're doing something different from everyone else. And so this episode was the perfect Chloe episode to make the opposite point, where she was all over the place, having fun with so many different people, like all these dynamics that were like different but also weaved throughout. So again, the Heidi Chloe dynamic was fun to see throughout the course of the night. And yeah, I mean, she did such a great job. So it was kind of everything that you would want in a episode performance from a cast member.
For sure. Yeah. I'm a big Chloe fan, always will be. I think she's like super talented, and I like to see her do the supporting roles more. That we can, say it all day, but that there's now room for those. So even to see her in the Blood Oath sketch or something like that, it's like, give her a chance to just have some comedic timing and just react to something. Like everyone else gets that benefit. It doesn't have to be an impression. So as much as I like to see her do those, Nicole Kidman, Drew Barrymore, all those are, and Nancy Pelosi, like Bill mentioned, they're fantastic. But kind of like what I said about Punky, it's just like, putting someone in a costume and putting them on stage and seeing what happens is sometimes is a great recipe for this show. Not only because the writing is strong, but because the acting is strong. And we talk about both of those things on this show all the time, and I'm happy we do. But Chloe Fineman is, I'm just so glad that she stayed on, because that's SNL just has I think a bad reputation with players like that, and we might be shocked that Melissa stayed so long and never got her due, unfortunately. But I don't think that will happen with Chloe. I mean, this Heidi Chloe pairing happened twice, so quickly together, update, and then followed by the workout sketch. I mean, I don't know if we'll see it again very often, but it definitely shows that like we don't have to rely on the same pairings and the same tropes. There's a lot of writers, there's a lot of cast members. Like you can, I I think it's funny. I forget what it was, who it was, but like, you forget that Kate McKinnon and Pete Davidson have met. Like, you feel like you don't see them together. Like things like that. I just like variety on the show, and that's kind of where I come from. So I kind of don't even care who the host is. A lot of people are like, bring Mulaney back, or I want an old cast member. I'm like, no, bring me someone I've never heard of. I don't care who it is. It just, if I see funny people interacting in funny ways, I am having a good time. I don't care if I have expectations of the show doing something that I know is good. I mean, I can rewatch it. I don't care. But give me Chloe with Brendan Gleeson having him spray blood. I'll laugh. I don't care. Because I didn't predict that. I didn't see it coming. So but yeah, I want to throw it to you, Nicole, for our final thing. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I have to talk about the obvious standout cast member of the episode. And as I mentioned, for me, the singular best performance by a cast member of the season so far, Ego. She had an amazing episode. It was just so fun to watch her. It almost felt like she was the host, but not in a way that was taking away from the host. Like she was just collaborating with Meg so much and was just, I feel like her voice was really all over the episode, and it was cool to see. I think at the infancy of this podcast was Ego's third season, and I feel like she had a really amazing third season and was really emerging as like the glue of the show. And then she's never not been amazing. I think she had a great fourth season, but I think probably not as good as her third season. And then now I think she is back to being like that sort of glue energy, and in this case more of like the star than the glue. But I think that it's cool to see, like, we're going to be talking about her in the way we were talking about her in season 46 now. And I just remember, like, my early memories of doing this podcast, we're talking about how Ego was just like so amazing and like really stepping into her role at the show. And then we weren't talking about it as much, and now I want to talk about it a lot all the time because I just thought she was so amazing. And my same point about Punky is true for Ego. I hope that she continues to have amazing episodes regardless of the demographic of the host. I think she just showcased that, like, she's amazing all over the place, and she should have, she should break her own record again when the host, whoever the host is, I think, like, it's just, I just want to see more of her all the time. And also I feel like she's kind of like pushing the show in different directions. Like the teacher that, well, we've seen a few different teachers that she's done, but the one, the classroom sketch where she played the teacher, like that felt like it was teetering on this like intelligence that I think a lot of other sketches this season have been missing. This sort of, which is ironic because she was playing a dumb teacher, but I do think there was this sort of like next level, deeper meaning to the sketch in addition to playing for laughs. And I think that we haven't seen that a ton this season. And so it was like, oh yeah, this show can be just the comedy, the laughs, the silly, the goofy, but then it can also make you think about other things in society and culture and the way that certain people are perceived, or assumptions or stereotypes. And I just thought it was like such a brilliant way to talk about all of that. And yeah, I think her voice really, other sketches throughout her tenure at the show have demonstrated that. And I want to see more of it from her, and frankly, just from everyone. I feel like that's been missing a little bit this season, other than what Ego has brought. Bill, what do you think?
Said.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic point. A lot of talk this year about the same tropes, the same, game show, the blood, the silly jokes. And I said last week on the Hot Take show, do it smartly and you can get away with it. We've seen 100, 1,000 teacher sketches, but like you said, Ego did this so intelligently, found a different angle to it and made it her own. And that's what you want. That's the smart that you want out of these sketches. You can get away with doing the same thing every few weeks if you do it intelligently. And ego is one of the keys to that. Yeah, you're right. I mean, season 46 was her high mark. I think we're going to look back on season 47, as great as a season as it was, as kind of a half and half. Heidi and Ego had such a great first half last year. Kate came back. It wasn't the only reason, but they didn't seem to know, were they saying goodbye to how many people, how they were going to say goodbye to them, and that seemed to distract from the show in the last half of the season last year. So I think now that they can concentrate, Cecily's really the only holdover, and you can kind of mold the show into these younger, less tenured people and make them the superstars. And Ego is definitely the head of that class.
For sure. I mean, I think I did a stat about like just kind of proving that Ego was the one to watch. Like, so I'm a fan of hers and like talking about her with people like you, but it's also just like, can I use the numbers? Of course, you got to use the stats to make your own narrative. I mean, that's what stats are all about. But is just proving like, Ego Odom is on the rise. And I don't know. I just like as a fan and outside of analytics, is like there's nothing that she can't do as far as I'm concerned. So I don't. There are some cast members that I really like or don't like as much that do one thing, and I don't think you could ask any SNL fan like, oh, like what's Ego's thing? Like she doesn't have a thing, which I like. So sometimes that can make you fall by the wayside because you're not front and center if you don't have a thing. Because if you have one thing that you do every once in a while, that thing will, appear on the show, and you'll be doing update or you'll be doing cold opens. But she can kind of do it also. The classroom sketch from last week was her longest appearance on the show. If you don't count the 3 Dionne Warwicks and the cold open she did last season about Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. So that was her a big moment for her, and obviously contributed to that being her biggest screen time night. And I was thinking, and I'm glad you both mentioned that sketch and got into it, Bill, right before I am right now, is that I was because I'm at the top of the show today. I was talking about how I didn't really like the episode, but then I watched it and I appreciated it more. And I was like, this is like a no-brainer that if you put this sketch earlier in the night, it showed off Megan Thee Stallion's acting was really good in it. And it just like, I hate to hate on some, SNL trying to do what SNL does and get people to watch the show. That's why they've been on for 48 seasons. But, I see that workout sketch and I'm like, this is such a lazy grab at like, let's have Megan twerk and like, let's do it. It's like, we're like Ego's acting and Punky and Devin and Megan Thee Stallion's acting. That sketch was so good. The sketch was smart. It was well paced. It was well acted. It showed diversity. It did everything that I wanted to see from a show hosted by Megan Thee Stallion, and it was funny. It was like it wasn't a downer. It was a great sketch. So I was like, if you put that sketch near the beginning of the night or before update or right after update instead of 10 to 1, like put a goofy workout sketch with Chloe and Heidi doing their flat butt routine, and maybe we would have appreciated the technical gaffes more, because it's like it's late, it's loose, it's funny, it's goofy. I'm like, man, we talk about pacing on this show a lot and how long a sketch is and where it's placed, and I was like, I can't find a more, I don't remember anyway, a more clear example than like wrong sketch placement, because I think that would have made the episode from like whatever letter grade you assign it up to the next letter grade. So that's about Ego and her talent, but also about this episode that we're covering.
That's a really good take, and I had not thought of it that way, because also the 10 to 1 sketches, we talked about that last week, and 10 to 1s and just in general back half sketches should be goofier and looser and like maybe more like physical comedy with like blood or with just silliness, and this sketch was like having that key like intelligence and deeper meaning and things that we're talking about. And so yeah, it's like it should be at the front half. Like the cold open is at the front half for a reason. And so this is the type of sketch that should get similar treatment. So that's a really good take, and I completely agree with you.
Not to mention that we had a literal classic 10-1 air before update, which was the deer sketch.
Right.
Even if you hated that sketch, you might have appreciated the 10-1 goofiness of it. And so, I personally didn't love the workout sketch at all, but I was like, oh, at least maybe it would have been like, oh, we have to get this in here. Let's, put it in the end. But the deer sketch was a 10-1 that for some reason must have overperformed a dress, so it was moved up or kept in the show rather than being cut. Anyway, but yeah, I think that's like just stands out so much to me in this episode, and I will look back on it and be like, oh yeah, that Eggo sketch was so great.
Yep, ditto. And again, also like one of our highest ranked sketches from last year was if not the highest, the parent-teacher conference, and that same backdrop that they use. And so it was bringing me back to that. And I was like, will Jason Sudeikis appear? I don't think so. But maybe this teacher was promoted or was brought onto the school because she was a parent, and she knew. I was like, there could be a whole like metaverse with these two sketches. And I mean, Jason Sudeikis is in the news at the moment, so I there was this part of me, I knew he wouldn't, but a girl can dream. Anyways, so we're going to also talk about our patron ratings. So every week our patrons put in their ratings of the cast members for the episode. And as always, you can become a patron as well. Patreon.com/the SNL Network. Join us. We have some exclusive podcasts there. You can get in on perks like this. It's a really fun community, so we, of course, recommend it. And so we're going to just share a bit on the patron rankings. We won't read these all out, but we'll just talk about some highlights. So let me pull this up. So, of course, we can all guess that Eggo is at the top at 9.2. And it's so rare that in all of these things we talk about, the patron ratings, the MVP, the screen time, the who do you predict got the most screen time, all these different metrics that we have on a week-to-week basis, very rarely will someone be flying at the top on all of them. So I just can't emphasize enough how strong of an episode this was for her. But so yeah, she's at the top. And then Marcelo and Molly are at the bottom. And I think it's a perfect example of people who are not, just in their short tenure so far, not always at the bottom, have been really strong otherwise. Marcelo was very close to the very, very high up, close to the top last week. So this is a perfect example of, I think, a strong dynamic cast where a lot of people are really good, and it's just like some of your episodes are better than others, and then like that, I feel like that's how it should be. You don't want the bottom to always be the same. You want it to just be like, yeah, based on the episode, it is what it is. So I just pointed out those two. Mike, you want to highlight anything else you find interesting here?
Not much, just that how similar it is to the power rankings. I'm just looking at them side by side. The power rankings, the whole reason they exist is to separate opinion from fact and analyze the show. That's why we're doing this right now. So it's kind of cool just to see that the fans, agree with the numbers. That's kind of just cool because they don't always do, and that's why it's fun to dissect them every week. It's because sometimes I said last week, like, impact player, because Sarah had the 10-1, and that leaves an impression on you, even though it's at the very end of the night. So things like that I think are important because it's not just about the numbers, but it's about like, what do the experts think? Do they like you or they not like you? So I don't want to weigh in on that every week, but I'm glad the patrons do. So I take a moment to shout out to them for voting, and everyone in the chat too as well, because it is fun to see your opinions on all this.
Bill, anything you want to highlight from this?
No, I mean, I think you guys said it all. I mean, it is very close to everything else that's been brought up. I do find it interesting that Sarah's as high, and just as I said at the top of the show, what she had, she made it work, and to see her up there with Punky and Devin and Keenan is pretty telling.
Yeah, Sarah is the queen of, no matter what her screen time is, she could be way towards the bottom. she will always rank high. If we compare like the difference between screen time and audience rankings, like that is an amazing metric, I think, to be like low in the objective and high in the subjective. Like that's perfect, because that also has this underdog narrative to build up to, and that's fun. And yeah, I mean, that was the moment, again, New York Jew. So for me, like that was one of the big moments I was thinking about from the night. And it was just one of the many parts of the night when so many people had so many moments, and she could just like capture the audience in just one moment in a way that I feel like no one else can. So it's so much fun to watch everything that she's doing. And with that, I think any other notes that we want to bring up before we say our goodbyes today?
No, we're good.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here with us. We are gonna take a little break, right, Mike? We'll be back when Jack Harlow is in our midst, is haunting us for Halloween.
Yeah, so that's the 29th, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, yeah. So we'll see you in November.
See you in November to talk all about spookiness. Okay, Bill, you want to do one more plug for your rookie superfan takeover, and then tell everyone anything else where they can find you?
Yeah, next Monday night, anywhere where you listen or watch, we will be on at 8 o'clock talking about the greatest rookie moments in the history of SNL. So the criteria, it had to be in their first season. So somebody like Molly Shannon, who only had 3 episodes, she had to get it in real quick. And so we had a lot of fun talking about that, and be interesting to see what everybody thinks and any differing opinions. But you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at BKLove73. Thank you guys for having me tonight. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining us. You are our first non-John guest, so we are happy to have you.
That's high praise.
And Mike, how about you? Anything else you want to plug or tell people where they can find you?
You find me at SNL Mike Murray, posting stats. That's what I do. That's why we do this show. Thanks to Bill for coming on. It was a blast having him. We try to keep this show, a little short in the weeks, and I'm like, oh man, Bill Kenney's on. Let's go as long as he'll let us. So this show could have been 4 hours, like last season's finale. I would have let him. So, shout out to Bill for coming on. I hope you come back, man.
Anytime.
Yes, I co-sign. I hope that you come back, and you can find me at Nicole Rovine everywhere in general, and then also at the SNL Network. We are continuing to post a lot. The SNL break week will not stop us from posting quite a lot. So if you are missing SNL in this break week, we have got you covered. So definitely follow along and, subscribe, click buttons, comment, like, review, rate everything always helps us and helps people find the show. So we really appreciate that. And with that, thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.